Macros are a great way to automate repetitive tasks in Excel. If you find yourself doing the same things over and over again, record your moves as a macro and assign a keyboard shortcut to it. To record a macro, the Developer tab on the ribbon needs to be activated as it isn't on by default. The Developer tab contains all the macro tools. To activate it, click on the File tab, go to Options, and Customize Ribbon. Under Customize the ribbon and under Main tabs, select the Developer checkbox. To record a macro in Excel, go to the Developer tab. By default, Excel uses absolute referencing to record a macro. That means your VBA code would always refer to the same cells that you selected, no matter where you are in the worksheet when running the macro. However, it is possible to change the default behavior to relative referencing. In this case, VBA won't hardcode cell addresses but will work relatively to the active currently selected cell. To record a macro with relative referencing, click the Use Relative References button. After that, click the Record Macro button, or you can use the key sequence Alt-L-R. In the Record Macro dialog box that appears, configure the main parameters of your macro. In the macro name box, enter the name for your macro. You can use letters, numbers, and underscores. I will name macro formatting data. In the shortcut key box, type any letter to assign a keyboard shortcut to the macro. It is optional. The macro shortcuts override any default Excel shortcuts while the workbook containing the macro is open. We will use Ctrl+Shift+W, which is not in default Excel shortcuts. Store macro and choose where you want to store your macro from the drop-down list. Personal Macro Workbook stores the macro to a special workbook. All the macros stored in this workbook are available whenever you use Excel. This workbook is the default. The macro will be stored in the current workbook. New Workbook creates a new workbook and records the macro to that workbook. We want to save it in this workbook. In the description box, you can type a short description of what your macro does. It is optional. Click OK to start recording the macro. Now we can perform the actions that we want to automate. We will change the font, size, grid border, fit in cell size, use bold text formatting, light green fill color, and center alignment. To finish the recording, click the Stop Recording button on the Developer tab. Our macro has been recorded. Now let's take a look at how to use the recorded macro. To open it, click the Macros button on the Developer tab or press the Alt+F8 shortcut. In the dialog box that opens, you can view a list of macros available in all open workbooks. Now, we can select any range of cells in Sheet 2. Press the assigned shortcut Ctrl+Shift+W, and custom formatting will be immediately applied to the selected cells. Let's view the macro code. The code of an Excel macro can be viewed and modified in the Visual Basic Editor. To open the editor, press Alt+F11 or click the Visual Basic button on the Developer tab. To see the code of this module, double-click the module. Firstly, we see the macro name. In VBA, any macro starts with sub followed by the macro name and ends with end sub. The second line is a comment, starting with an apostrophe character. The next code is font formatting. Sets the font of the selected range to Arial with a size of 11. Resets certain font properties to default values. The next one is the border. Adds thin continuous borders to the left, top, bottom, right, and inside vertical and horizontal borders of the selected range. This code will adjust the column width for columns A to G based on specific values. This line makes the font in the headers bold. Sets the background color of the header row to a shade of accent color 6. Align the content in the selected range to the center horizontally and vertically. To save the macro, you need to save the workbook as macro enabled. Go to the File, Save as, choose Location, and choose Excel Macro Enabled Workbook. If you found this tutorial helpful, give it a thumbs up, and if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Subscribe for more useful tips.